Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gil Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. We are on to round two at Wimbledon, or really we're on to round three. Round two is over and done. A lot easier, a little bit easier at least, for Federer and Djokovic. They both move on in straights. Roger Federer today on Thursday with the straight set victory over Richard Gasquet. 7-6, a tie break, and then a 6-1 and a 6-3. Novak Djokovic with 6-3 sets. And we're here to break it down on three. A marvelous performance from Djokovic, Amy. Does it get much better than that?
He is locked and loaded at the moment, and I haven't even started to dig into the statistics yet to see how this compares with the 2019 Wimbledon, because I wanted a larger sample size. But all things seem to be clicking. His serve, both the forehand and the backhand, his movement, which he has successfully navigated the early days of the slippery grass, and I think that that's going to even get better for him. So he's locked and loaded right now. They've got him not on center court. They've got him on court one against his next round opponent, which we can talk more about in a bit. But I think he's just all systems go right now.
Yeah. The error numbers are incredible. Go ahead, Joel.
Well, I think these opponents, and we can talk about it with both these guys. I felt bad for Kevin Anderson. He's a very experienced player who 6 years ago was up 2-0 on Djokovic. 3 years ago, they played in the final. But again, Anderson, between injuries and aging, looked pretty overmatched there. As long as Novak could kind of get the serve in play, then he was pretty much able to do what he wanted. And this is also my minor point. This is why I don't like the 32 seeds, because I like to see the top players tested more in the early rounds. And Anderson, while of course he's an excellent, fine player, I think we anticipated this was going to be token resistance, and that's pretty much what it was.
It was kind of like a clock, this match, right? 4-3, Novak breaks. 4-3, Novak breaks. It was like, okay, time. It's time. And it was just kind of funny how that played out. But I was amazed at the cleanliness of this match for Novak, because, I do think that there was a bit of cooking the books on one of the match points where I do think Novak made a forehand unforced error. But officially, in the stat book, Novak made 0 forehand unforced errors for the entire match, and he made 4 backhand errors. So it was kind of like, once they were in the baseline rally, there were 0 gifts from off of Novak's racket. What do you make of that? I know, Amy, you don't like the error stat, and
it's not that I don't like errors. I don't like unforced errors.
But doesn't that tell you he never missed when he never gave anything easy?
Right. I don't want to get into the whole error thing, sure, because there are numerous ways that an error can be forced, that is not, in that moment readily visible to whoever is scoring, which, by the way, the person that is scoring is often someone unpaid and not paying attention. But anyway, yeah, we'll do the whole error thing, and I'll bring our entire audience on board with me that errors should just be errors. But don't get me wrong, Gil. I love errors. That's the way that most points are scored in tennis. Errors, they're great. And I think, actually, talking about that, Novak is pretty much the king of sizing up his opponent both before and during the match and figuring out, where am I going to get my errors? Mm-hmm. What wing, what way? And if one way's not working, you can bet he's going to find the other way.
You could almost draw a color-coded map of the court. I think that's the thing in tennis, to think of what parts of the court can I hit into safely and what parts are danger. And when you played someone, he and Anderson are the same age, and they've played each other many, many times. I think it was 9-2 coming in. So this was their 12th match, and it's very familiar. It's funny. And that's where I think at all levels of the game, that's very much the case. That's where the dynamic is very similar. It's like, I know you, I know your ball. And gee, you're a little older now. You're a little slower. Kevin Anderson, never known as the fastest person. So there are lots of parts of the court where Djokovic could safely hit the ball. And, Anderson's fine, a good player. But again, this is the type of guy, this is the peer level guy who isn't as good. And he's not as good as he once was. And Novak's getting better. I mean, that's the amazing thing about the three, is how they're better than they were. They're not just holding territory, they're better. And they keep competing. And people like Anderson, again, between the injuries and just the overall approach to the game, particularly the two flat forehands and the kind of intriguing, the world's tallest baseliner. Big serve.
Although I was shocked, Joel, I was watching the match and I was thinking, did he hear me and Joel? Because especially early on in the match, he was approaching and coming in a lot. It just wasn't working for him.
Well, but at least he did. And this is where we talked about this before, and we can talk about this again with Gasquet. We talked about when Gasquet played Nadal.
Yep.
Played someone 8, 10, 15 times and had minimal success. I don't even call it rolling the dice. I call it just emptying the bucket. You got to do something. Otherwise, it's that, what's the definition of insanity, right? Where you do the same thing again and again and expect a different result. So good for Anderson. But then, of course, it's like, whoa, center court Wimbledon versus Novak. It's a tough place to trot out some innovation.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those themes, and we can get into them with Federer, Gasquet as well, because a lot of the same stuff applies. But the last thing I kind of want to hit on with Novak is what he started his press conference with, and something we discussed coming into the tournament, which is that this pattern of winning Roland Garros in 2016 was a difficult pattern because he lost the spark as soon as he won Roland Garros. And I think at this point, it's very clear that this is not going to happen again. And Novak learned from that experience in 2016 and just is very much at the top of his focus right now.
Absolutely. Very much so. I mean, that was a different case. He'd won the French for the first time. And yeah, that was a little different 5 years ago. And then, but this, he seems, like you said, Amy, he's just dialed right in.
Yeah.
Speaking of press conferences, if I could just jump in with regard to Novak, I was really surprised yesterday after the Andy Murray match, which was a great match. This guy, Oscar Otta, is asked about the greats, and he basically took a shot at Novak, saying, well, Federer is my GOAT because he is always classy and he doesn't create controversies off the court. I was like, first of all, who are you? and to me, just personally, as a fan and an observer of the sport, I think what Novak is doing off the court, which is creating some controversies, although I think he's doing it for the betterment of the sport, is incredibly difficult. I mean, Oscar, try doing that. I mean, try to maintain your level and win while still engaging in other things off the court, for reasons that are, wanting tennis to be better. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly bold for him to dip his toe into a topic like that, especially with the take that he ultimately ended up having. So I don't know. I think you said it all, Amy. All right. Federer gets through in straight sets as well. Richard Gasquet. That's now a 17-2 head-to-head. And Joel, you covered the match for tennis.com. You guys can check that out. Roger was asked after the match, Federer, how do you feel? Or Roger, how do you feel about your level? Is it where you want it to be? And he said, I don't know. I don't know. Is that how you left the match feeling?
Very much so. And it's interesting, Federer plays two Frenchmen first two rounds. That's about the only thing they have in common. And in a way, it's kind of funny. Gasquet has the shinier resume, having been to the semis here twice, but Mannarino is going to be the more difficult opponent. And he proved that. But these are kind of like, is it non-conclusive or inconclusive? Like they're both TKOs, these matches. I mean, Mannarino, got hurt, exited after splitting 4 sets. And then Gasquet, they played 12 pretty tight games, but to me, those games struck me as kind of more like a mutual showcase of here's what I hit, here's what you hit. Oh, that's good. It's almost like it looked like a practice set. They probably played a zillion, those two. And then the tiebreak, Federer completely dominated, but even then he was denied. The Gasquet double faulted at 1-6 in the tiebreak. Can I just win a set? Can I just win? Like Federer's like, I guess I won that set. I was up 6-1 in the tiebreak and he double faulted. I mean, I'd rather win it. Wouldn't you rather win the set with a point earned? And then Gasquet Federer beats him handily breaks him early in the second and rolls on. And Gasquet hits his share of dazzlers. I called Mannarino is the aging pest and Gasquet is the aging shot maker. So Federer I think it's very non-conclusive as to what kind of data he's getting now from this.
I didn't see that match that way at all, the Gasquet match. I was like, okay, finally, we're getting some sets in here that are Federer type sets at Wimbledon. And I thought that he was very much in command of his serve, which was a good sign. We're used to seeing that at Wimbledon. In fact, nobody else will have noticed this, but toward the end of the second set, when Federer was in command and he was obvious he was going to win the set, he hit a serve that he was sure was in and so quickly challenged that, and he was right. It was called out and he challenged and they said, no, it was in. And to me, what it said was he's really starting to take command of his spots because he knows exactly where he's hitting and where it's landing. And that's a really good sign for the serve. And I thought he returned well. And some of his errors that you wouldn't expect him to make just off the ground, or even when he was at the net, a couple of little cuts that he took, they really didn't miss by much. They clipped the tape. So overall, I thought it was a much more Federer at Wimbledon kind of match.
I get that, but I guess to me, the exquisite comfort of playing someone like Gasquet allowed Federer to feel that comfort because he was serving to someone who's probably not going to threaten him too much with the return anyway. Not that he backed off his serve at all, as much as in other words, those spots look bigger when you're not serving to Zverev's two-handed backhand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's quite easy. It's quite easy in pro tennis to serve versus a one-handed backhand. I mean, you're not going to get stung as much, and they're just kind of like, again, Gasquet. That's kind of like old home week. It's like, okay, you're gonna get a few. That's kind of nice. You're gonna have. I mean, and Gasquet hit his share shots, but it was definitely a little bit more of a composed Federer package. There weren't hiccups. He dominated the tiebreaker, which is important because he didn't flounder in the tiebreak, and he then broke open the match and consolidated his break. But again, I think it's such a strange matchup. And remember, it's a second round where Gasquet played Nadal, and Gasquet made his big push in the second set of this match. In this case, he made it in the first set of that. I hope Gasquet plays Novak in the second round of the U.S. Open, so we can have kind of the Titan, the trio.
Then we'll get him on the show.
Well, it sounds to me, Joel, like you had kind of pronounced this a TKO before the match was even played, just by virtue of the competition, who he was playing.
But it kind of is so Gasquet. Let me grab the stat here. Gasquet hasn't won a set off of any of our three in a very long time. He's 0 for his last 42 in sets. He doesn't win sets against these guys. So I get where Joel's coming from here. It's just it's normally not a match.
But Roger then took care of business. I mean, you can't criticize Roger.
Right. No, I agree.
I'm not criticizing.
No.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just not giving him, okay, I don't like to do these too often. I'm not giving him an A and even an A- for this effort. I'm not going to do that.
That's tough. That's really tough. I mean, I know, but I just all you can do is play the person in front of you. I don't know.
No, but that's
and
true.
He played him well.
He definitely played it well, but I wouldn't feel like I would say, oh yes, now I see Roger, baby's back. Like, for example, I would have felt that more. I would have believed that more if he had gone into a fifth set with Mannarino and won it no matter how he had won it, whether it was 7-5 with the grit or 6-2 with the dominance. But with this Gasquet, it's kind of like, yeah, you played that the tiebreaker. That was a pretty good revealer. And then, Gasquet, second set, he's serving 0-1, 40 love. And then he gets to break point. And what betrays Gasquet? The pet backhand, shanks the backhand. It's like, oh, I mean, I felt bad for Gasquet because now it's kind of like he's just kind of like, okay, now Federer's up a set and 2 love. And it's that kind of Pete Sampras territory. I win the first set, I get the early break in the second, and I'm pretty much going to more or less steamroll you. And then he did. So, yeah, Federer played well, but I think the interactive aspect, and that's why I think maybe, when we look at the next matchup for Federer, that's going to be really interesting. Then I think we're going to know. Then we'll know.
Yeah, yes. Norrie does a little bit more things, and we will get into that. But I do want to talk about one thing that happened in the match, which I just found fascinating. So I haven't seen this very often, but it was early in the second set, and Federer hit an overhead from the baseline, and Gasquet hit a backhand down the line winner off of Federer's overhead. It was as cleanly struck as you'll see. That's why Gasquet has millions of views on his backhand compilations on YouTube. But then Gasquet served to Federer's backhand on the very next point, and Federer hit his hardest, cleanest backhand return of the entire match. And from that point on, whenever Roger had a backhand, he would absolutely smoke it. And then admitted after the match that Gasquet's down the line backhand inspired him. Could you imagine that, Richard Gasquet? That's your reward for hitting an unbelievable shot. You inspired your opponent.
I believe he had 40 love after that. And yeah, look at me. I can hit a gorgeous backhand. And then didn't Roger win that game?
He did.
I mean, so Federer, this becomes like a practice session. That's what Federer, it's all good. I mean, I think these guys, I mean, Gasquet's a fascinating player. I mean, he's had an excellent career. He's been a top 10 player. He's had a sustainable career, but then you see, like you said, you go up against these three, and it's interesting about everything from the homogeneous surfaces to their skill, and makes them pretty impregnable. That the guy like Gasquet, it's not like he has a style that got him on the clay compared to the grass. It's just kind of, okay, I put up a good set against Rafa. I put up a good set against Roger.
Yeah. Well, Federer now has won another stat for you, 55 consecutive sets against Gasquet. I think that's the thing. It's not that he doesn't have good win-loss records. It's that he normally doesn't win any sets. Anyway, let's go on to the previews. And for Novak, next up is Denis Kudla, someone he played in 2019 at Wimbledon, beat him in straights, then played him a little bit later on that year at the U.S. Open and also beat him in straights. And the closest set Denis has ever had to Novak is 6-4. I don't know. I mean, one interesting thing is that Kudla's best shot, his favorite shot, is the backhand down the line. So he's twins with Novak in that way. Yeah,
I think it's going to be kind of interesting. Kudla's played his best tennis on grass. He loves grass. If they could play on grass, I think about if as Amy's talked about, a longer grass season, then it would be Denis Kudla. He'd like that. He'd like a longer grass season, but got a good backhand. Been to the 16s here. I think that's going to be interesting. But again, as we pointed out, Novak is so solid right now.
I am like disagreeing up and down with Joel today. I mean, people have to understand Joel is like a brother to me. We are the best of friends, but I disagree with him today. I don't think it's going to be interesting at all.
You think it's going to get slaughter? You think you think Kudla's going to win no more than how many games is Kudla going to win?
I don't like to predict. But okay. A score like 1, 2, and 3 wouldn't be too off the mark for what I think could happen. And
I guess there'll be some interesting rally. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Even the organizers didn't put this one on center because it's like, come on. But no disrespect to Kudla, and I know that I've seen him play challenger events, and he's a really good player. I just think he's overmatched in this one.
Oh no, I don't think of him as possibly being able to win the match. I just think there'll be some interesting rallies more than there were for Anderson.
Okay, fair enough.
I think Kudla in the text of the rallies. I don't know about score. I think kind of the ways he's going to push them. I think Kudla on grass is, how would I put it? It's a little like Tennis Sandgren is in Australia. You know, like this is more his place where he can do, and Tennis Sandgren can make his move. I don't think of Kudla as a great player. I think the more interesting one is the Federer-Norrie match.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, for Kudla, it is like everything's relative. I think all tennis hipsters and all very close followers of tennis know, oh, Kudla, the grass specialist. And like, just with that, it's, you know, there are levels to it. The reason Kudla's a grass specialist is because he can make the third round at Wimbledon, and he can't really do that at the other slams. He certainly couldn't do that at Roland Garros, right? So that's why he's a grass specialist. He's not a grass specialist because he's making the semis at Wimbledon.
No, right. He's a grass specialist. We're great on a curve.
Yes.
Right. That's right.
Boy, do we ever. We really grade, and all tennis fans grade on a curve. It's
at least ours is analytical. I think some other fans I talk to grow purely emotional. We try to like give proper to everyone. I mean, there's some other people who just want to see these people as just like literal cannon fodder, and they're mad that they're even intruding on their eventual Novak, Roger, Rafa, or whatever.
Yeah, I would agree. But, you know, the challenger guys are doing great this year. I feel like all the guys come out. Anyway, okay. Federer, Cam, Norrie. It is their first meeting. Norrie is a lefty, similar to Adrian Mannarino, has some similar qualities. The backhand is very flat. He keeps it low. He doesn't really miss it very often. The forehand is very different, though. Heavy topspin, more racket speed, but someone who works very, very hard, and he's having an incredible year.
But outside of that, he's like Mannarino. So I think he's different than that. I mean, I think he's got a little bit more pop to his thing going lately, you know, because this is the arc of the player, and it's interesting how these three have witnessed so many of these arcs. They've watched these people go from being children to parents to grandparents, you know, Milos Raonic, where have you gone? Where are you? And Thomas Burdick. And so now along comes a guy like Norrie, who vaulted 40 spots up the rankings this year and had a couple of set points on Nadal. So he's a little bit more like, what's the limit yet? See, with the other guys, what we saw with Anderson and Gasquet, oh yeah, I know your limit. This is your limit. This is your winner count. So this is your deal. You got some serves, Kevin. You got some backhands, Richard. But Norrie, British crowd, center court. I think it's going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting as a match. That's going to be more interesting than the Novak Kudla match as a match. I mean, Federer does that too.
It could be a real litmus test to see what Federer's got. In some ways, Norrie reminds me of Koepfer because they both went to college. They're both lefties, and they both just work their tails off. You know, it's not going to be any, you know, like today I saw Gasquet just not run for a few things. You're not going to get that with Norrie. So I agree. I think this one's going to be fascinating, and I'm nervous, but in a good way, because I think the atmosphere is going to be sensational.
Oh, that crowd is going to be torn. They've got a British player, but they've also got the longstanding the club champ. I mean, the guy who's won it 8 times. So
yeah,
and he's going to do some things. I mean, there'll come some moments. Just like in Djokovic's first round match, right, where he's playing Draper. There'll come some moments where Norrie's going to be the king of the world. I mean, he's going to crack some shots. He's going to hit a forehand. He's going to hit an overhead, and something's going to happen, and the crowd's going to yell, and we'll see how Roger vies with that differently than like in Paris when in the second round he played Cilic, in the second round he played Gasquet, my familiar friend. Now you're right. I like that comparison you made. Yeah, the Saturday versus a new young opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that, and look, I know about tennis. I'm not a sports sociologist, so I could be totally off on this. I actually think the crowd will be with Federer because I think there will be a prevailing sense like, okay, Cam, like we're going to be rooting for you for the next decade on this court, but Roger, you know, the clock is ticking. So I actually think the crowd's going to be pro Roger. You guys agree?
I agree.
Yeah, but you know how the Brits are, like they'll politely applaud for just about anybody. Norrie will get a standing ovation even if he loses. But I
Yeah.
think if you had like a decibel meter on there, then the cheers are going to be ever so slightly louder for Roger.
I agree. I think that's right. I mean, he'll get his local applause, but it's not going to become. It's the same way, by the way, that I think would happen if, let's say, Federer played John Isner in a U.S. Open final. I think more people would be rooting for Federer than an American. Mm-hmm. That's not. I think one of the great things about tennis is the way it transcends borders. That it's not always as simple as my country's player, right or wrong. It's more a matter of, okay, the guy, yeah, and no question, Federer. I mean, but Norrie, they're a fair crowd. They're a fair crowd. It's not going to become this Davis Cup partisan thing.
Right. Key to the match for me, Federer's backhand return against Mannarino. He was who actually stands really out wide on the ad side, which is kind of neat, and then generally hits his slice serve very wide. And Federer was hitting his I wouldn't even call it a block return, because he really slices it. He doesn't just block it. He cuts at it. And it really wasn't working at all. The return was misfiring. Mannarino's +1 play was actually pretty good, and Federer said as much. Against Gasquet, Roger was hitting over the backhand return. I'm curious to see what it looks like against Norrie. Obviously, the lefty is going to serve to Roger's backhand a lot, and to me, that shot is the key to the match.
The cross-court backhand return from a Federer versus a righty has far more margin, whether it's blocked, whether he drives it, or chips it. He's going to be getting back to our Novak map of the court. He's in less trouble when a righty serves to his backhand in the ad court, gets the return cross court, probably be in really okay thing. But then the lefty, back to the forehand, it's a different thing. I mean, he knows this from his Nadal experience. So I guess the question will be how he takes measure of the Norrie serve on the grass and how that connects for him, right? And how the quality of Norrie's serve, his ability to back it up, and his ability, and that's one of the things that's really neat about Federer and these players, how they kind of measure the time and the calibration. It's happening so fast, and they're able to adjust to it and take it in.
I'll be interested to see. That was a good point, Gill, about Federer slicing versus coming over the ball on the backhand side. I'll be interested to see what Roger does more. Put aside the return for a second, but just on the rally, because that ball is going to be coming to Federer's backhand. And you would think that on this surface, he would slice quite a bit, but you're right. He came over it. I would think more today.
He did.
I think he wants to drive it, but see, I think it's also, there's two things going on. One is, yes, okay, what's the single tactic that beats Cam Norrie? But more importantly, what's the single tactic that helps you win the tournament? So how do I employ that enough? And if the tournament winning play is working, such as driving the backhand, that instead of just getting through this match, then that's going to be good enough. Then the slice enters if we're like, okay, set all 2-4, got to come up with a plan B, something else to disrupt this guy. But I think Federer, we've seen the last 4 years, is far more committed to driving the backhand than he used to be. So, that's got to be, he's got to kind of live in that space. And I know, I understand that, not to bring it too banal, but as someone who can hits both those backhands, if you slice too much a little times, it's like lobbing returns and doubles. You get a little too passive. You can get passive. It can make it, and you start taking balls later. That can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
So I think it's important for Federer. He knows, okay, drive it, step in, go, and then that activates the forehand also.
Yes, and he gave a good interview to Chris McKendry at ESPN today, and he actually talked about that against Mannarino. He thought the slow stuff would set up the aggression, so he was going slow, wait for my chance to attack. And he said against Gasquet, he changed the tactic, none of that, hit through, swing fast, because he didn't, it wasn't in the game plan against Gasquet to hit that slow stuff and the backhand slice. So it's interesting. Hey, Spain against Switzerland in the Euros. I think it's tomorrow. That's Federer against Nadal. Do you think, let's get predictions for that? Can we predict soccer? I know we don't predict tennis.
I don't predict anything. I try not to predict anything. I try not to predict anything. No. What you got something?
Okay. Joel,
Yeah.
predict if there's going to be any texts between Federer and Nadal. Can we predict that, or no, still no predictions?
What if they're going to send a text back to another?
Will there be some WhatsApp action?
Yeah. That's tomorrow. It's Federer's off day, so yes.
Okay, they'll exchange some notes, and Rafael will be watching it. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine.
We're gonna end on that. All right, we promise tennis on the next show. We're gonna talk about tennis. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time on the next episode of 3.